Imagine this. You decided to become a surrogate. Maybe you wanted to help a couple who desperately needed a child. Maybe the financial compensation was an added incentive. So, you go through the screening, you meet the intended parents, you build a relationship with them, and eventually you become pregnant with their embryo. And everything seems to be going according to plan. Until around 20 weeks, you go in for an ultrasound, just a routine ultrasound, and receive devastating news. The baby you're carrying has been diagnosed with a serious heart condition. And then the intended parents make a decision you never would have expected. They want the pregnancy terminated. But guess what? You don't. Now what? What does that mean for you? You're being told that continuing this pregnancy may mean you break your agreement that you signed, which could lead to facing financial consequences and ended up in a legal battle. What would you do? This isn't a hypothetical situation. This is the story of McKenna West, an Alaskan surrogate whose decision to continue her pregnancy has led to a highly publicized legal battle concerning surrogacy, parental rights, abortion, and medical decisions. Here's the main question stemming from this story. When you become a surrogate, just how much control do you have over the pregnancy that you're carrying? Hi there, welcome to the Deca Wonders channel. I'm Janice. Today we are examining 10 facts you need to know about surrogacy before signing up to become one. Or if you're just generally curious, this video is for you. Thank you so much for stopping by, and if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss any of our videos. If you've already subscribed, thank you so much for being a part of the Deca Wonders family. Now, let's get started. Before we get into the complicated parts of this story, let's examine surrogacy. What exactly is surrogacy? Surrogacy is when a woman carries a pregnancy and delivers a baby for another person or couple who intend to be the child's parents. Now, when most people hear the word surrogate, they might picture a woman becoming pregnant with someone else's baby. But there's an important detail that many people don't realize. In what's called gestational surrogacy, which is the type most commonly used in the United States, the surrogate does not provide the egg. Instead, an embryo is created through in vitro fertilization, or IVF, using an egg and sperm from the intended parents or donors. That embryo is then transferred into the surrogate's uterus, where she carries the pregnancy and hopefully gives birth to the baby. So biologically speaking, the woman carrying the pregnancy may have no genetic connection to the baby at all. Think of it this way. The intended parents are saying, we want to have a child, but for whatever reason, I can't, or we can't carry this pregnancy ourselves. The surrogate is essentially saying, I can carry the pregnancy for you. And that takes us to number 2. Why do people become surrogates? For some people, the reason is simply being able to help out another person or couple who want to become parents, but they may have experienced infertility or they just cannot carry a pregnancy to term safely. So a surrogate comes into play and decides to carry the baby for them. And of course, for others, financial compensation is part of the appeal. It's important to understand that surrogacy isn't simply get pregnant and get paid. A surrogate is taking on the physical demands of pregnancy, medical appointments, potential complications, childbirth, and recovery. And before someone can become a surrogate, there are typically medical and psychological screenings to determine whether she's an appropriate candidate. So the motivation can be different for every woman: helping a family, financial compensation, or a combination of both. But that brings us to the question a lot of people are probably wondering: how much does a surrogate actually get paid? There's actually no set amount. In 2026, published agencies showed that for first-time surrogate, the range is about $50,000 to $70,000, while for an experienced surrogate, it can be way more. Some current programs advertise total compensation packages ranging $70,000 to over $100,000, depending on the circumstances. But here's the important part. That doesn't mean a surrogate gets handed $100,000 for having a baby. Compensation can include base pay, allowances, and additional payments for things like a C-section or carrying multiples. Medical expenses, legal fees, and other pregnancy-related costs may also be covered separately under the agreement. And the money is generally paid over the course of the journey, rather than as one big check at the end. So yes, surrogacy can provide significant financial compensation, but that money is intended to recognize the time, physical demands, inconvenience, and risks associated with pregnancy and delivery. Now let's move on to number 4. How does someone become a surrogate? Because it's not as simple as filling out an application form and getting pregnant. A potential surrogate typically goes through medical and psychological screening to make sure she's physically and emotionally prepared for the pregnancy. For example, New York's guidelines recommend that a surrogate has previously had at least one healthy, uncomplicated full-term pregnancy and delivery. The screening can include a physical exam, medical history, lab work, and a psychosocial evaluation. If she's approved, she may then be matched with intended parents through a surrogacy organization or sometimes independently. But here's the important part. Before an embryo is transferred, the surrogate and intended parents negotiate a legal agreement, and both sides have separate attorneys to make sure everyone understands their rights and responsibilities. Only after those steps are completed can the medical process begin, including IVF and embryo transfer. So becoming a surrogate isn't just a financial decision, it's a medical, emotional, and legal commitment. So once a surrogate is pregnant, what happens during the pregnancy? Because this isn't a case of you're pregnant now, so see you in 9 months. No, it's not like that. It's a lot more. Once the pregnancy is confirmed, the surrogate has regular medical monitoring, including blood work and ultrasounds. In the early stages, appointments can be quite frequent before she transitions to routine prenatal care. And just like any other pregnancy, things can change along the way. There can be complications, pregnancy loss, a multiple pregnancy, or unexpected findings during prenatal testing. And this is something that is discussed before the pregnancy even begins. Surrogates and intended parents are encouraged to talk about issues like prenatal testing, pregnancy complications, and what they would do if something unexpected is discovered. Number 6, who controls medical decisions? And this is where things can get really complicated. If you're carrying someone else's baby, who really gets to make medical decisions? The answer may surprise you. The surrogate is the person who is pregnant, and according to the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, she has autonomy over her own medical care. That means the intended parents don't simply get to walk into a doctor's office and make medical decisions for her. The surrogacy agreement should spell out the rights and responsibilities of everyone involved, but a contract doesn't give another person control over the surrogate's body. For example, New York law specifically requires a surrogacy agreement to allow the surrogate to make health and welfare decisions regarding herself and her pregnancy. And this is where the McKenna West story becomes so important, because what happens when the intended parents believe one medical decision is best for the baby, but the woman carrying that baby believes something completely different? That's when a pregnancy can turn into a legal battle. So far, we've talked about what happens when a pregnancy goes according to plan, but what really happens when things do not turn out as expected. Pregnancy doesn't always follow the plan. A surrogate can experience a miscarriage, pregnancy complications, a premature delivery, or an unexpected finding during prenatal testing. And sometimes those situations can force the surrogate and the intended parents to confront decisions they never expected to make. That's why surrogacy agreements are supposed to address difficult possibilities before the pregnancy begins. But here's the reality. You can put something in a contract, but you can't predict every medical situation that could happen during a pregnancy. And when something unexpected happens, the emotional stakes can become extremely high. One person may be thinking about the health and future of the baby. Another may be thinking about the health and autonomy of the woman carrying that baby. And suddenly, what started as an agreement to help build a family can become a serious disagreement. So, what happens when the surrogate and the intended parents simply cannot agree? They end up in a legal battle. Number 8, who legally owns or parents the child? When a surrogate delivers a baby, who is the actual parent or parents? In a typical gestational surrogacy agreement, the intended parents, not the woman carrying the pregnancy, are intended to be the child's legal parents. But here's the catch. There is no single federal surrogacy law in the United States. Surrogacy and parentage are largely governed by individual states, and those laws can be very different. Some states provide clear legal pathways for intended parents, while others have restrictions or additional requirements. For example, in New York, when a compliant surrogacy agreement is in place, the law provides that the intended parents are the legal parents of the child, and the surrogate is not considered a legal parent. And that's why the surrogacy agreement and the laws of the state involved matter so much. Because when a pregnancy crosses state lines, or when the agreement doesn't go according to plan, the question of who has legal parental rights can become much more complicated. Number 9, disagreements. What happens when the surrogate and the intended parents come into disagreement? And let's just go back to the McKenna West story for this point. West was carrying the baby for a California couple when, around 20 weeks into the pregnancy, the baby was diagnosed with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, a serious congenital heart condition. According to West, the intended parents wanted the pregnancy terminated, but she refused and decided to continue the pregnancy. The couple disputes aspects of West's account and has maintained that they are the baby's parents and have the right to make decisions regarding their child. West eventually traveled from Alaska to Texas, where she gave birth on August 12, 2026. And now, the disagreement has moved far beyond the pregnancy. There are legal battles involving the surrogate, the intended parents, and multiple states with questions about parental rights, medical decision making, and the surrogacy contract all being fought in court. The intended parents have also sued West, alleging that she breached their surrogacy agreement. And that's what makes this case so important, because it shows us that when surrogacy goes according to plan, it can help create a family, but when the people involved fundamentally disagree, the consequences can be enormous. And now we're finally at number 10, what you should know. If you've ever considered, or if you're considering becoming a surrogate, there are some important questions that you should ask, or some important things that you should know before you sign that agreement or before you begin the medical process. First, do I fully understand the medical risks of pregnancy and childbirth? Second, do I have my own attorney who represents me and not the intended parents? Third, what exactly does my contract say about medical decisions, complications, compensation, and unexpected situations? And perhaps one of the biggest questions, what happens if the intended parents and I disagree about my pregnancy? You also want to understand what medical expenses and insurance are covered. What happens if the pregnancy ends unexpectedly? And what support you'll have emotionally and financially throughout the process. Because surrogacy isn't simply a way to make money, it's a medical commitment, a legal commitment, and an emotional commitment. And as the McKenna West case shows us, sometimes the situation you agreed to at the beginning can look very different once you're actually pregnant. So before becoming a surrogate, know your rights, understand your contract, ask the uncomfortable questions, and make sure you have independent professionals looking out for your interest. Because when it comes to something this life-changing, you don't want to discover what your agreement means after something goes wrong. So surrogacy is more than just carrying a baby for someone else. It's about trust, it's about legal contracts, medical decisions, emotion, money, and so much more. And the McKenna West story has reminded us that even though someone enters into a contract with the best of intentions, circumstances can change, and when that happens, what happens next? So let me ask you, if you were a surrogate in this situation, what would you do? Or if you were the intended parent or parents, what would you do? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments, so go ahead and comment, let me know what you think. And as usual, if you found this video informative, if you learned anything new, Remember to subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up. Remember to turn on notifications so you never miss any of our fascinating facts, stories, and real conversations right here on the Deca Wonders channel. Sometimes the most important stories aren't about what really happened, but are about the questions they leave us asking. Thank you so much for watching this video. As usual, keep wondering, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm Janice from the Deca Wonders, and I'm out.